Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z and Corey Clubb, the podcast you're looking for. This is, yes.
For an entire generation, people have experienced Star Wars the only way it's been possible, on the TV screen. But if you've only seen it this way, you haven't seen it at all.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
We've been waiting for you.
The force is strong here, even stronger than the coffee.
This is Jim Hill of Jim Hill Media.
And Len Testa of TouringPlace.com and WDW Today.
And you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z and Corey Clubb. This is the podcast you're looking for.
Corey, we're so close to Celebration Anaheim, and this is continuing our coverage of preparing for this amazing convention, and there's just so much to talk about.
There is, truly. There's so many facets of, obviously this is my first time to a celebration of this capacity, an event of this capacity, really, and there's so many ins and outs, and it can get confusing. I know even we talked earlier about Indiana we went to was a little bit confusing on our end, is just kind of getting around and getting to see panels and it's just knowing where to go. So certainly it's hard to get that thing straight.
This is a topic that is so big that we had to have experts from the Disney community to join us, Jim Hill and Len Testa. Jim is a blogger, podcaster, a theme park historian, and a Disney enthusiast whose podcast, The Disney Dish with Jim Hill, is a must-listen for Disney aficionados. Len Testa is the co-author of the unofficial guide to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and is responsible for TouringPlans.com. He joins Jim Hill on the aforementioned Disney Dish podcast and can be found each week on the popular WDW Today podcast. A huge welcome to Jim Hill and Len Testa.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, guys, your podcasts are incredible sources of information for Disney, and this was a perfect, especially leading into Celebration Anaheim. So if you could, tell us about the history of the connection between Lucasfilm and Disney, particularly with the theme parks.
Wait, Jim's going to start talking. It's Tuesday at 9 p.m. That's a long. Go ahead.
Yes. Oh, no, it's true. It's a lengthy story. I'm going to try to do the Reader's Digest version, but long story short, the Walt Disney Company in the late 1980s really found itself trailing what was going on in the film industry at that time. I mean, Walt had been dead for, almost 15 years at this point, and Disney kept looking at, Star Wars and what Spielberg was up to, and it's like, we should do that. And which is how we ended up with films like The Black Hole, and
they're exactly like a Spielberg movie.
Well, but that was the problem. That was how Disney looked at it. I mean, it was just this sort of, well, they have special effects. We should do that. In fact, I think one of the scariest things that came out of this period, and I swear to God, this is a real project. In fact, Starlog actually wrote about this as the follow-up. It was something that was going to be done in the wake of The Black Hole and Tron, but it was Snowstar. And, this was how Disney was going to horn in on the Star Wars action. They were basically going to tell the story of Snow White, only set it in space, and that when Snow White was getting away from the evil queen, she ended up on an asteroid where there were 7 little droids mining that came to protect. I mean, seriously, this is how innovative they were during this period, which was not very.
My God, if you could make the droids Jewish, this would be a great Mel Brooks film.
Funny they don't look Jewish.
Yeah. I just you just feel bad because in fact there's kind of a famous story during this period where Spielberg really wanted to make a movie for Disney, and he actually brought E.T. to the studio. And, it actually broke down over the fact that Spielberg likes to have those that participate with him on a film have a cut of the action. So it was like, well, I'd like to bring John Williams on board to handle the score. And, and it was just one of these things. No, we don't do that here at Disney. In fact, we'll handle all that. And Spielberg just sort of kind of is like, okay, I'm going to take this someplace else. So, eventually you had people like Tony Baxter and God love him. It's sort of the leader of the next gen of Imagineers who, finally got through to management and were like, look, we're not making movies that we can base theme park attractions around anymore. That it's, in fact, it was kind of a sad irony during this period that when Spielberg was collecting audio for Temple of Doom, he actually got permission from Disney to go into Big Thunder Mountain to get the squealing noise from the trains.
Oh, wow.
That's what they kind of used Disney for during that period. It was just sort of like, okay, this is the thing we loved as children, and I know that there's a specific sound I want in that attraction. But as for Disney, the company, that the best that Disney could do during this period is actually got the rights to do the storyteller albums.
Did they? Let me interject real quick. Did they go to Tony's to get the chilled monkey brains?
I know
how much Len loves Tony's.
I love me some Tony's. We actually walked by that last week, and both of us decided not to go in. It's like, hey, you want to do something inside of Tony's? Nah.
For our listeners, Tony's is an Italian restaurant in the front of Main Street at Walt Disney World in the Magic Kingdom. And ironically enough, that's the restaurant I ate at before I proposed to my wife. So for that reason, I like it. But other than that, the food is not stellar. But anyway.
Well, and now you've got me wondering, Len Laurel updated the menus. Did they have chilled monkey brains this time around?
I don't think so. Unless it was on the Disney dining plan and I somehow missed it. On the,
I know they have lots of gluten-free offerings.
Yeah,
but, that's what it's for the gluten-free people.
There you go. Well, anyway, so Tony gets through to Ron Miller, and Ron Miller reaches out personally to George Lucas. And they actually have this dinner. I want to say this is 81, 82, something in that time frame. At the Disney Family Winery, the Silverado Winery, and it turns out that Lucas is this huge Disney geek. I mean, he proudly talked about how his family went on the second day the park was open. I mean, the day, not July 17th, 55. They were there on the 18th. The first day was open to the public. And they'd go year after year as a family. So George knew Disney parks inside out, and he was actually thrilled with the idea that his characters could possibly go to Disney and into the parks and live there. And then to jump ahead here, 82 is the year that Disney opens Epcot, and that turns out to be this huge drag on the company, both financially and the fact that it wasn't meeting attendance expectations. And by the time 84 rolls around, Ron Miller is out and Michael Eisner is in. But Michael Eisner and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, if you know your Lucasfilm history, have a history. I mean, when George and Michael, when George and Steven were trying to find some studio to make Raiders, they were walking it around to everybody in town. But again, they wanted this much better deal than anyone was willing to offer. And only Eisner was willing, who was then in charge of Paramount, was willing to cut the deal. And so Eisner heard that they'd had these conversations with Lucas and, immediately starts going through back channels and talking with George. And what's kind of interesting during this period, we weren't talking about the Star Tours vehicles or anything like that. They were actually envisioning an interactive coaster where, as you were going up the load hill, basically these holograms of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader would appear, and everybody riding on the coaster would get to pick, whether they wanted to go the dark side or to go with the Force. And depending on how the roller coaster, everyone on the roller coaster voted, that's the track you took, or those are the effects you saw. In fact, it's kind of interesting, Len. We were talking just last week or thereabouts about that track switch that was used that makes that change in 6 seconds on Expedition Everest.
Yeah.
This is that track switch. This is the first place it was developed for.
Oh, really? That was it?
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking, this idea came up in
30 years ago.
Yeah, and it took them 20 plus years to finally use it.
Wow.
Anyway,
hurry. Wow.
I know, right?
Well, that's the weird thing about Disney is that sometimes, for example, if you know the parks, the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin attraction where you go through with the guns and shoot the interactive targets, as far back as 76, 77, in Disneyland Backstage, there's this magazine they do for the cast members. The Imagineers mentioned that they were working on the Little Green Men ride, and they described it to a T. That you're in an Omnimover, you're moving through this building, you've got your ray gun, you're shooting at aliens, and in the end, they decided not to make it because they didn't have an IP they could build it around. And it took till 95, 96 till Toy Story was made by Pixar that finally, here's Buzz Lightyear, here's a character you can build it around. And speaking of that sort of thinking, somebody you really probably want to reach out to at some point to talk to is Mark Eads. He's a former Imagineer. He's actually now a beat reporter for the Orange County Register. But it turns out Mark spearheaded the Star Tours project.
Wow.
Cool. And, but again, to sort of backfill here, Disney had discovered simulator, the technology, the stuff that at that time was used to train aircraft pilots. And, Mark actually flew over to England to check this technology out. And it was really cool, but it was just one of these things, what could we use this for? Eventually they sort of thought that, okay, so if we take this from a thing where it's something that one pilot can sit in or 3 and 4 people for a jetliner and then bump it out to a room of, 30 or 40 people, what could we do then? And, just about this time, here comes, Eisner, in 85 signs the deal with Lucas. They begin casting around for an idea, and Mark comes through the door with the simulator technology, and it's just sort of like, look at this. Couldn't we do something with this, with the Star Wars universe? And Lucas was such a, that I know, living in this post prequel age that, that people sometimes aren't as kind to George as they should be, but George actually came up with honestly my favorite moment out of the original Star Tours, which was, how you got on board that thing and then, it left the station and you had the feeling that you were still on your classic Disney attraction. You were on something that had tracks. In fact, it deliberately moved like it was a tracked vehicle. And then suddenly, you went into the wrong hangar and you're free falling and you're moving through the air. George came up with that. George was like, let's trick them. Let's do the first, 20, 30 seconds, just mimic the movements of a classic track vehicle and then blow their mind by, just making it realize immediately, this is not any ride like you've ever been on before.
That's great.
Yeah, just you bring up a good point with that. It's such a fun ride. We were there recently last year with my family and had a blast on that ride. But there's a lot of speculation out there. A lot of folks talking about what's going to happen, coming up with Disney and Lucasfilm merging here. And we won't spoil too much around here on this podcast as far as films go. But with Disney, we kind of make an exception. Mm-hmm. So what kinds of additional presence do you guys think that Star Wars might have in the Disney theme parks?
Jeez. Well, Len, you can tell him the 2 magic words.
The 2 magic words.
I hope they are Millennium and Falcon.
Yes.
Actually, sadly, they're blue milk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, sorry.
All right.
This is what it's going to come down to. You guys have often, I'm sure, on this podcast, talked about what the retail and restaurant opportunities were on the Death Star prior
and the commode.
Exactly right. What does a restaurant look like on the Death Star? So I think that's if you look at how the Be Our Guest restaurant has done for Disney in the Magic Kingdom. You guys familiar with it?
Oh, very much so.
Yes.
So it's the hot restaurant in Disney. In fact, when Jim and I were in the Magic Kingdom last week, it was kind of funny because you could still sort of get walk-up reservations everywhere within the Magic Kingdom. Cinderella's Royal Table had just sold out that day, but you couldn't get a reservation for Be Our Guest within 6 months. So it's so far ahead of everything else in terms of demand. It's crazy. And so what Disney's realized is two things. One, if you build a destination restaurant, they will come.
Oh, yes.
And two, they woefully underestimated the capacity or underbuilt Be Our Guest. Because what was it, Jim? Like 550 people?
And that's only for lunch and breakfast. It shrinks to what is it, 337 because they use the Rose Room for prep for table service.
So the upshot of it is an average day in the Magic Kingdom has 51,000 guests, 52,000. That's average. And on a good day, if everyone's hustling through at lunch, nobody's chewing their food too long, nobody's ordering too many desserts or whatever, having that second cup of coffee, they might be able to serve somewhere around 2,500 people for lunch, which means that 1 in 20 people who are in the Magic Kingdom could actually get through for lunch on a very good day. So 5% of the park could get into the hottest restaurant in Walt Disney World. And I don't think they want to make the same mistake at the studios. So, I think not only are attractions and story going to be integral to whatever Disney does with Star Wars in the studios, but the dining has to be on par with what they do with Be Our Guest. But the downside of it is and Jim and I were talking about this last week. Other than the blue milk, there's really not a whole lot about food, as far as we can tell, in the stories, right?
Right. Very, very. There are some naming of food, but that comes much later, not really in the films.
And it's not like Harry Potter. When Harry Potter was when Universal was building Harry Potter, Jim has this great story about how somebody actually flipped through every page of every book looking for every possible reference to food. And because Harry was in a school, I guess it was a little bit easier for them to integrate it in. But every brand name of food that was mentioned in Potter is somewhere.
Oh, yes.
In Diagon Alley.
Well, butterbeer alone, my goodness.
Yeah. Well, Jim, how much did they make on butterbeer? Enough to pay for the land?
Yeah, that butterbeer, the original financials for the Wizarding World of Hogsmeade were that they were looking to recover everything they'd spent on building the land in the return on investment of 3 to 5 years. They got it all back in 5 months. And that, seriously, about 70% of that was on the back of $10 glasses of butterbeer.
My gosh.
Wow. Now, so understanding that, here's Disney, going with a fine-tooth comb through all of the Star Wars movies, looking for definitive
meat.
and here's the thing: they've come up with two restaurants. They have the Mos Eisley Cantina and Dex's Diner.
Oh boy!
And that's it. I mean, it's one of these things that that in fact they've. I'm sure you've heard about the surveys they've sent out to Star Wars fans looking for what people want. And they really do want Mos Eisley and they want the Cantina experience. But after that, it was like looking for that food opportunity or that memorable food item. And again, everybody's like, well, I remember the milk at Art Baru, and it's just like,
but they're not going to do our idea, Jim. And that's the thing that's killing me.
Oh, and what might that be, Len?
Uncle Owen's barbecue pit.
Oh.
I actually, honest to God, guys, I have a shirt made that says that.
Oh, goodness. That's
the graphic and everything. I will send you a picture of it.
Yes.
Okay. What? Too soon? What?
Too soon, yeah.
Well, the Lars family listens to the show, or they used to until that joke. Oh, that's great.
But yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if J.J. Abrams in his notes for the script is like, and where did they eat breakfast before this scene? And is it possible for someone to be eating some sort of trail mix or something? Couldn't we have this discussion about the ways of the Force over some pancakes?
Well, honestly, in the way they've themed some of the restaurants, particularly at Animal Kingdom, really all they need to do is slap something Star Wars related, and people will go in droves. I really do agree with you, though. The Cantina's got to be, that's the main draw. I mean, I'd love to do an episode of Coffee with Kenobi from the Cantina. That'd be amazing.
Could you imagine?
Well, that supposedly is phase one. That in fact
has to be.
In fact, if you know Disney Hollywood Studios at all.
Oh yeah, I used to work there.
Okay, so you're familiar then with Echo Lake and how you've got Gertie the dinosaur,
very,
and Min and Bill's on the other side. That's gone.
In fact, your quick interjection, your very first show that I heard between the two of you was when you took everybody through when it was called the Studios or MGM Studios. That was a great show. But anyway,
thank you. But yeah, what they're looking to do is sort of create one continuous Star Wars experience from when you walk up Hollywood Boulevard and reach that first intersection, and they've got Hollywood and Dine there and Indiana Jones stunt show in the distance, but Mos Eisley is there, and then just sort of this street continues all the way back to Star Tours. The adventure continues, and understanding that not everybody is looking for the same sort of thing. So, for example, there's an X-Wing spinner, much in the style of the classic Dumbo, only in this case, there'll be an up and a down and, a device that allows you to open the wings. Sure. They're looking to move, what is it? The Jedi Academy indoors into the old Sounds Dangerous space, mostly because, as you know,
that'd be nice.
Well,
there's nothing really going on there that's consistent. Anyway.
More to the point, though, that from having worked at the studios that those lovely light Central Florida rains,
yes,
that will drop $1,200 of water and shut down everything. So if that goes indoors, at least you don't lose your outdoor shows.
Oh yeah, and that thing isn't that one of the most popular things to do at the studios anyway?
Oh my God, it's very competitive to get your kids in.
Yes.
Yeah, ours got rained out last year, so we had to do something indoors.
Yeah.
So there you go. This is exactly how they're looking to address that. And then in between, it's just what's fascinating for me is that I'm sure you've heard the stories, but Iger himself verified this during a Quarterlies call not too long ago, where the Imagineers were rushing to get stuff out the door that were mostly keying off of the original trilogy and the prequels. And Iger was kind of, now, wait a minute, we're making new films. We're doing, Star Wars Rebels. Let's take a look at this stuff and see what else we can fold in. Understanding that, when the newer fans come to the park, they're going to want to see something that reflects what they've just seen. And the older Star Wars fans are going to want to, to see the movies and the characters that they know and love. So it's kind of an interesting balancing act that they're trying to do here. And, as I understand it, they've deliberately left some spaces in the canvas somewhat blank, based on, they want to see what the reactions are come December when,
for Force Awakens.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And, because again, just as Harry Potter has proven that, when the fans see something they love and they can go visit that world, they happily open their wallets repeatedly, and that in the end is kind of what this is really about.
Well, it makes you curious to see how Star Wars weekends will be impacted, and on a non-Star Wars note, what would happen to the Osborne lights? I'd hate to see that go, but if it's for the Cantina and more Star Wars, I guess I'm okay with it.
Yeah, well, we what have we just heard, Len? I guess Osborne is safe for at least
Osborne
2
is safe
years?
for this year, possibly next, because of the number of people that have already booked it. Once Disney has your money, they're exceptionally reluctant to give it back. So I've heard that for this year, it's fine. Next year, maybe. Apparently, people book this thing out 3 years in advance or whatever.
Well, the after-hour parties, that sort of thing.
Yeah. But the amount of money that they're making on those at $25,000 a pop, 2 of them a night, or $15,000 a pop, 2 of them a night. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. That's a lot of money.
That's like an afternoon at the Polynesians' new layout.
Yeah,
isn't
the
it?
bungalows, right? Yeah, jeez. Yeah, pretty soon you're talking about. One of the things I was going to do was, speaking of the Polynesian, I was actually going to figure out how many nights you'd have to stay at a bungalow to actually pay what Walt paid for all 28,000 acres back in the 60s.
Oh boy!
I'll bet you it's less than a year.
You guys, I'm sure it is, and you guys will appreciate this. I proposed to my wife on Sunset Point, thinking, well, they'll never knock that over. This is a shoo-in, and here you go. Now I'll just interrupt somebody's lunch, and hi, I'm just going to visit this spot.
I just need to go
That's right.
your deck for a minute.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the canteen a lot and the X-Wing spinners. Have you heard any other speculation about different attractions at Disney World? Is it pretty much all going to be focused on the studios?
Well, I mean,
I would say that's the only place really to put it, and it makes sense.
Well, it's interesting to bring that up because obviously,
well, hold on. So I just want to say,
Sure.
if it's successful enough, they'll remake freaking Germany into the Death Star. Because that's what we've learned from Frozen.
Germany has a huge Star Wars presence in the 501st anyway, so there you go.
That's what we have learned. Actually, Morocco, right? It'd be all the sand pits. But if we've learned nothing from Frozen, it's that the world is a malleable place.
True.
When it comes to franchises. All right, go ahead. I'm
Talk
done.
about a whole new world. Okay.
But the other thing you have to remember is that this is Disney Parks and Resorts, which is a worldwide entity. I mean, in fact, one of the things that's constantly been discussed about, for example, the original version of Star Tours at Disneyland, it got dropped into the old Adventures Through Inner Space building, and it's
immensely popular.
Yeah, but the problem is that there was only room there for 4 simulators, and so it always has longer lines. I mean, the Disney World has 6, and I think Tokyo has 6 as well.
And it's right there on the right hand side at the beginning of Tomorrowland.
In fact, that Bruce Gordon, the late Imagineer, actually pushed for, and it had a great idea. The notion was to pull down the Carousel of Progress building, the thing that's now sort of Marvel Central. At that, but the idea is that change that into the Star Tours terminal building, and so you'd go into it, and it would be your standard airport. Only each of the terminals, I mean, one terminal would have the classic Star Tours attraction that you were supposedly going to
nice.
Endor, and then there was going to be one going to Hoth, and there was another one going to Tatooine. But the great part of it was that it's an airport, so there's a there's
greets and all kinds of things.
Well, that coupled, but there'd have to be a food court. There'd have to be the half the fun was being in line and watching the luggage carousel go by, and just looking on it. But my favorite part of that.
What does a Wookiee suitcase look like? Right.
That's right.
There you go. But when you went upstairs to the food court in to pay tribute to the fact that the building used to turn around, they were going to have a stage that turned, and so you got the band, you'd first get the band from the Cantina, which would perform, and then it would rotate, and there'd be Cy Snoodles or whatever. I forget blanking his name. The guy.
That's right.
Max Rebo.
Oh, well, there we go.
Band. Yeah, you got it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the sad part. No math, no algebra, but that I remember.
I'm an English teacher. I can relate.
There you go. But yeah, that never got addressed, and they are, one of the ideas that's right now being discussed is, and again, there are going to Disney fans who are going to lose their minds if this actually does in fact go forward.
Sure.
But it's pulling down Mickey's Toontown and turning that into Star Wars Land.
Oh, wow.
Well,
I always figured that would be a more cosmetic change, and Florida would be where they get really hip. But I guess that I could see that as well.
Well, face it, one of the things, in fact, again, to bring this back to Potter, Disney has to start looking over its shoulder at Universal, because in 2016, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter Hollywood Universal version opens. And this is supposedly the one with the full-size castle with the dining hall experience. And,
oh my!
There's a lot of stuff on the table and that's the other thing that people really don't like talking about when it comes to Disneyland. I mean, Walt Disney World is an actual destination resort. Disneyland, if we're being completely honest here, is kind of the world's most famous regional theme park.
Mm-hmm.
And given that 70% of the guests that visit that park each year are from less than 100 miles away, they are in fact in direct competition with the Universals and the Knott's and all of those folks. And so they really do have to churn at those parks. They have to put in newer attractions or parades or fireworks shows. They've got a whole slate of 60th anniversary stuff that'll be coming online in just a few months. And between the plussing of attractions and all that, but Star Wars Land, an actual land, is a huge component of that. And if all goes according to the plan, we'll be online late 2017, more likely 2018. For
both coasts, or just
they really do want to be able to push. I mean, I face it, Disney. $4 billion is not the stuff that's on top of Bob Iger's dresser. I mean, this is a considerable investment of the company, and they want to start getting a return on that investment. And by having these attractions open on both parks, on both coasts, in addition to the upgrades that are in the works for both Tokyo as well as Paris, that they can start getting that money back.
Well, and the odds are good that since Celebration, which we'll get to in a little bit, is coming up next month in California, maybe that's when we'll start to hear some sort of announcement, or maybe they'll wait until the expo.
I'm actually hearing it's a 1-2 punch. You got those folks who go to the Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim,
and they're going to
you're going to get the first real look at this. It's Iger and supposedly Kathleen Kennedy on stage together who will, Kathleen's very hands-on about all this stuff.
Well, we know JJ and Kathleen are kicking it off at 10 o'clock on Thursday, the 16th of April. So,
yeah, I keep an eye on the schedule for, something that both Iger and Kathleen are going to be there for together.
Wow.
I think Kathleen and JJ are mostly there to show folks a good chunk of the film and to get you all super excited. But this is, face it, this is, Disney has other things they want to reveal at this event. And you guys will get the first indications of the size and the scope and the scale of what Disney is doing for the theme parks. And then just a few months after that is the D23 Expo. And for the Disney fans, they're going to get the details. You guys are going to get the broad strokes, the size of the land, hints of the attractions, that sort of thing. Coming in August is, the snack bar goes there, So,
sure.
Yeah.
Before we're going to take a teeny pause. When you were talking earlier about the Star Tours, mm-hmm. I wanted to pick your brain for maybe 5 minutes. We'll probably edit this part and move it back into the beginning of the conversation, because I'd love to hear your observations of how Lucas transitioned from starting the first generation of Star Tours, if you will, all the way to selling the company to $4 billion.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a complex history with George. In fact, there's kind of an infamous story. I don't know if you guys heard about when they were going to be doing the pod race update for the attraction. This was about 99
mm-hmm.
or thereabouts. And it was strictly, in fact, George had reached out when they were making Phantom Menace and to Imagineering and said, you need to see what we're working on here. I think we've just come up with the greatest Star Tours, idea that's ever been. And, the Imagineers come up to San Rafael, take a look and go to Skywalker Ranch and look at the boards and and everybody agrees like, wow, this is killer. And so they actually put together this entire scenario where, it's the sort of classic Star Tours. You get in your vehicle, you accidentally end up at Tatooine and you get directed into the pits. But there was this great moment where they were going to break the fourth wall where, sort of a roof hatch was going to open up and a droid was going to lean in and start talking, to at this point, it was still the Rex droid rather than C-3PO.
Sure.
And as you're watching on the monitor, you realize that, they are outfitting, our Star Tours vehicle with racing pods, but the pilot, Rex isn't flashing on this at all. And so he goes to leave, and suddenly he's actually in the middle of the race. And it was this wonderful 3.5 minute long thing. And they started developing it. And then George decided to take his family on vacation, and they went to Walt Disney World. And God help us, he went to go see Indiana Jones during a time when, frankly, Disney wasn't taking all that great care of the Epic Stunt Spectacular. It was looking kind of tattered, and a lot of effects weren't working. And George came back from that vacation furious because, the whole notion was that I entrusted my characters to you. I wanted them to be evergreen, to live on past when, I'm in control of them, and to come and see what a shambles Indiana Jones is I don't think I want to proceed with this pod race update of Star Tours. And he shuts the project down. And that sort of frosty relationship between Disney and Lucasfilms lasts till Michael Eisner leaves in 2006. And it's Iger who reestablished contact and spent a lot of money updating, Star Tours and Indiana Jones, any place that George could possibly go see it. And, George revisited it on another family vacation, saw that things had changed, and, reopened the conversation that's actually how we got, Star Tours, The Adventure Continues. And, it's, I think the thing that fascinates me is the notion of, here's, the morning of, they're doing the grand opening. What was it, May 20th, 2011. And George and Iger are having breakfast together in the Brown Derby. And,
that's right.
And Iger just sort of broaches the idea. And Lucas basically says, I'm not ready, but if I were, I'd love to have it, be at Disney, particularly the Disney company that's now run by you, that's doing such a great job with Pixar and with Marvel. And in a lot of ways, that's one of the only reasons that Lucasfilm ended at Disney, is that he saw that Iger had actually become hands-off and respectful of what Pixar and Marvel were doing, and thought that, okay, so, a Lucasfilm at Disney could have that exact same deal.
That's fascinating, and in a way, Indiana Jones was somewhat responsible.
Yeah, no, and but the other part of the story is that I'm sure that was everyone was waiting for that shoe to drop. That that why was it just Star Wars, and clearly George owned part of Indiana Jones, and why wasn't that mentioned? And there was another whole protracted negotiation that they had to go through before they finally cleared the rights to Indiana Jones. And that involved conversations with Spielberg and Paramount. And in fact, the irony is that they actually had to undo a lot of Michael Eisner's handiwork to finally get Indiana Jones out of the clutches of Paramount. But Michael had written a really great contract, or had Paramount's legal department put together an amazing document that gave them virtually every right on the planet. And in fact, they've still retained all of those films going forward. Disney can make new Indiana Jones films, but, the first four still remain property of Paramount and Spielberg and Lucas.
We talked earlier, too, a little bit about Celebration and things going on in Anaheim this coming April. Pretty soon here, we're getting excited. And, lo and behold, it just happens to be Disneyland out there. And Dan and I have spoke back and forth about possibly attending for an afternoon or a longer portion of the day if we get the idea or to go there. But I know there are a lot of our folks that are attendees to Celebration that we wanted to go to Disneyland as well. Could you guys give us a crash course a little bit on Disneyland Resort for Celebration attendees who may be looking to take the day or evening to take that adventure?
This is where I cede the microphone to Mr. Testa, who knows this backwards and forwards and upside down. That Len, if somebody is looking to get away for an afternoon to go over to Disneyland, what should they be doing?
And I'll just jump in real quick. Corey mentioned we're thinking about trying. I'm going to tunnel out of the Anaheim Convention Center to get to Disneyland if I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should definitely do it. So Disneyland is, of course, the first truly universal theme park. So lots of places have amusement parks, but Disneyland was sort of the first major theme park where all of the lands are designated a separate theme, and it's a totally immersive environment. Obviously, it's been there since the 50s. The big advantage of Disneyland over, say, Walt Disney World or any of the other Disney theme parks around the world is that you can still see in Disneyland a lot of Walt's personal touches. So, for example, if you go into New Orleans Square, on each corner of the building, there are these special iron symbols. And the symbols actually tell you what the street looks like around the corner. And the story goes that Walt was in New Orleans with his wife, happened to see the symbols on the building, realized that his New Orleans Square did not have those symbols, came back to Disneyland, asked his Imagineers to build them or to make them and to put them on the buildings. So stuff like that, those little touches that date back to the late 1950s, early 1960s when Walt was still alive. That's definitely the thing to see there. A lot of classic attractions, things that have influenced theme parks worldwide. Pirates of the Caribbean, you guys are all familiar with. Space Mountain is actually a takeoff of something called the Wild Mouse, which is a classic amusement park attraction going back almost 100 years. Walt's big addition to it was putting it in the dark, so you couldn't see where you were going.
Wow.
Did I ever tell you the story, Jim? I don't think I've ever told you this, but I actually rode one of the original Wild Mice rides in England. The one that was like 100 years old. It's like being put in a bathtub on railroad tracks.
Oh boy!
I was about to say, and you still have functioning kidneys. That's really impressive.
All of my vertebrae are fused together now. But
it sounds like college for some people.
Yeah, right. But that's the big thing about Disneyland, right? So you go in and you can definitely see that this was one guy's vision. And a lot of it, despite all the corporate stuff that's happened since Walt passed away nearly 50 years ago, a lot of his touches are still there. It's much, much, much smaller than Walt Disney World. If you've been, you can easily see all of Disneyland in a long day.
And what is it they say you can fit Disneyland and a certain amount of buses in the parking lot of the Magic Kingdom?
Magic Kingdom,
Florida?
Yeah, it's true. It's much, much smaller. And DCA is is about the same size. I mean, you could get through them both in a day, whereas Walt Disney World with its 4 theme parks and 2 water parks and 4 golf courses and 26 or 28 hotels, whatever. It's just on a vastly different scale. But
and you mentioned the Pirates of the Caribbean. What a lot of people don't realize is sometimes people think, "Oh, I've seen this in Florida. I don't need to ride it here." Well, there are some amazing differences, particularly with Pirates and I think the Haunted Mansion too. Really.
The Haunted Mansion is more debatable. I don't think there's anyone who would say that the Walt Disney World version of Pirates of the Caribbean is the better version of the two.
Oh, it's not even close. It's like
No.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything offensive, but yeah, it's not even close.
And, Walt Disney World version was the first one I saw. It has a special place in my heart.
Sure.
But the Disneyland version is just...
It's longer for one thing.
It's like the difference between Diet Coke and Coke. That like if you all of your life you drink Diet Coke, you're like, this isn't so bad. But then if someone actually gives you Coke, you know what you were missing.
What is it like? Go ahead.
It's like that. It was
it's all like an ocean cruise, but there's no water and you don't actually go anywhere. From that Muppets. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the funny thing is too, in Paris, it's actually a better Pirates of the Caribbean than in Walt Disney World as well.
Wow.
It's different, but yeah. And, when it comes to the Haunted Mansion, I kind of do prefer the Walt Disney World version, but I understand how people could like different ones. I actually like the Walt Disney World version of Space Mountain better too.
Oh, yes.
So
what's the facades though? Like even like the building for It's a Small World is gorgeous.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's original Mary Blair stuff. And Jim and I actually did a series of podcasts about It's a Small World and the other rides from the 1964 World's Fair. But a lot of that stuff still lives on in Disneyland. I mean, Carousel of Progress, well, that's in Disney World now, but same idea. And
well, heck, Mr. Toad.
Mr. Toad is what I mean. How many amusement park rides are there that you end up going through hell? And the funny thing was, I told my daughter this, because we went through it one time, and I'm like, we go through it and I get off the ride. I'm like, did you notice anything strange about that? She's like, no. Like, you didn't notice going through hell in it? That he dies and it goes to hell, and then we actually had to go back and rewrite it, and now it's one of her favorite rides.
Ironic. Well, honestly, if you've ever been through the line for Toy Story Mania with two hungry teenagers, that's kind of
same
through hell too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You have my sympathy.
And there's also some drops on Pirates in California. It's fairly significant. I mean, it's not like Space Splash Mountain or anything, but it's still fun.
It is, and I like how you go up the waterfall to get off of it in Disneyland too. That's kind of neat. I still periodically go back and I look at when there's nothing to watch on TV. I'll go back and look at YouTube videos of home movies that people took in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, that's fantastic!
Oh my god, it's just the whole country was filled with optimism. Walt's building out his dream, and Jim and I actually were talking about this on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and it was, if Walt had lived 10 more years, the Epcot that we got would have been vastly different than the Epcot that was built after his death. Now, it might have bankrupted the company. I mean, it could have been a failure, but it would have been different, and that's sort of one of the regrettable things.
Now, here's something that go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, our listeners, a lot of them, of course, are very familiar with the Disney parks, but for those that aren't, the difference between Star Tours in California and Florida is pretty much non-existent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, besides, I guess the queue, of course, is quite different.
I mean, the conceit for Disney Hollywood Studios was, again, you're going on to the set of a Star Wars movie, so you go by the ATA that's really a prop, and you walk in past the director's chair and lights, and then it becomes the set. Whereas, the Disneyland original, I mean, you're there. You are, in fact, what's so funny is that when you read the press for the opening of the original Star Tours, they talk about, that it's this galactic travel organization setting this up on Earth, and what better place to take people out of than Disneyland? I mean, the tourists are already here. Grab them, go. But it is going to be interesting to watch. In fact, that whole component is going away with this, huge expansion of the Pixar land at that park and the arrival of Star Wars land. I mean, this is not a working movie studio anymore. This is a park that celebrates the movies, and in fact, that's another thing that Iger just referred to last week. Is that it's been rumored for quite some time now, but Disney Hollywood Studios will get a new name, and supposedly it's Disney's Hollywood Adventure. But my understanding is they're still pulling focus groups in via Craigslist. In fact, again, just a suggestion to your Coffee with Kenobi fans: if they live in LA, and keep an eye on Craigslist, a lot of Imagineering focus groups get recruited that way. And if you want an early taste of what's going into, the Star Wars lands and attractions, just make yourself available to go over for an afternoon to 1401 Flower Street to consult. So
very good advice.
So
Disney's Hollywood Adventure. I can see that.
I guess I can digest that, I suppose. I mean, it'll be the third name for the park.
Yeah, well,
they buy stationery by the caseload. It's fine.
Well, let's hope we see some announcements around Celebration for sure. That would be great. And speaking of Celebration, there are a lot of people when the convention closes, they still want to get together with their friends and their Star Wars family, really, because that's kind of what the Star Wars community is. It's like a family that some will get along better than others, but for the most part, we're all there for the same thing, and that's the love of the saga. So it's nighttime in Celebration, and you're near Disney, and maybe you don't want to pay for a theme park ticket, but Downtown Disney is right there. Let's make a case for Downtown Disney. What does that offer in California?
Well, it's honestly some great urban planning. I mean, in fact, the people, when the original California Adventure opened in January of 2001, I mean, people weren't necessarily all that thrilled with what was in the theme park, but Downtown Disney has some wonderful, wonderful stuff. In fact, if you're looking for places to dine or hang out, I mean, for example, if you're dining at a budget, what is it? It's the Roaring Rapids. What's the place inside of Grand California, Len?
It's not.
You know the one.
Yeah. It's not the Storytellers Cafe. It's the
no.
The other.
There's a great quick serve tucked away in that hotel. Likewise, you have a wonderful, huge, a tremendous atmospheric lobby to hang out in.
There's a huge fire right there. You can sit next to the fire if it's cold.
The Hearthstone bar there, another great place to hang out. And there's all sorts of great little restaurants up and down. And at the same time, if you want to meet some colorful characters, just push a little further and go down to the Disneyland Hotel and wander to Trader Sam's. I mean, if there's ever,
you'll never get in, but it's a lot, if you can.
I think they make exception for Bantha hunters. I mean, it's just you can jump the line. There's a lot of great spaces like that. Again, just right across the street there. And in fact, I think the other thing to understand about the Anaheim Convention Center, in fact, you guys will probably be able to take advantage of the fact that Disney has already held 3 D23 expos in this building.
Yes.
And I would have to imagine that, given that Lucasfilm and Disney are now one big happy family, the event planners are sharing the information about how to properly run an event in this building. Because it's 3 stories of convention space coupled with the Anaheim Arena, which tends to be the place where they hold the really, really big events. That's 5,000 seats, I want to say, Len.
Wow. That is correct, actually. We just had James Arnold Taylor on last week, and he's going to be the MC for Celebration. He's, of course, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he said 5,000.
Well, there we go. But yeah, it's a relatively easy space to move around in, and they'll typically keep the sort of the retail and display space on the first floor, and you'll then have a lot of your panels and presentations in different sized rooms up on floors 2 and 3. But the really big Megillah shows are going to be held in the arena. And the nice thing is that if you're not willing to walk over to even to downtown Disney, just out there, if you head to the right down Catella, there's lots of great chain restaurants and that sort of thing. It's a great space to hold a show like this. It's not, if you've done San Diego Comic-Con and you know how overwhelming that can sometimes feel. This isn't that size. This isn't that space. And to be honest, I'm kind of looking forward to the show myself. I just wish I'd thought ahead to set up credentials, but so I'm kissing butts in lots of directions right now. It's like, hello, please let me in. So.
Well, very good. I'm glad you brought that up. The Anaheim Convention Center. This is my first time being there. Dan, I believe it's yours as well. Just experiencing the center itself, and you talked about it having 2 different floors. I didn't know that to begin with. Is there anything else you guys can kind of explain on as far as what guests can expect from the center, and like tips maybe how to get around the best ways to move maybe through the center itself, or possibly drop in and get food? How does it work when conventions are in town and
parking too? Really.
Yeah, parking.
Well,
too.
Actually, this is the luckiest thing about the setup for the Anaheim Convention Center. Actually, there is a Disneyland satellite parking lot. This is the Toy Story lot that honestly, you park the car and it's just a straight shot, maybe an eighth to a quarter of a mile from the parking lot straight into the convention facility.
It's definitely walking distance.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do be aware though that again, It's the classic
some busy streets. Yeah.
You're crossing some busy streets, coupled with the fact that this is Disneyland overflow parking. But I'm assuming anyone who's going to the con is arriving early and staying late, so this really isn't going to be an issue.
So it's not like Frogger, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's just be aware that somebody might be just standing in the street with a large spatula. Just.
Anyone else think about George Costanza when he said Frogger?
If you're coming from somewhere else, you can also use the Anaheim Rapid Transit, the ART.
Oh, that's an excellent
buses. I think it's like $1.50, something like that. But it goes all around to the major hotels in the area. It's got tons of stops, circles by Disneyland, circles by the convention center. It's really, really inexpensive transportation, and you won't need to drive or park or anything like that.
Likewise, again, there's lots of great hotels right there on Catella that are within walking distance. So, you can just, find, you don't necessarily think you're locked into, I have to go to the Disneyland Hotel, Paradise Pier, Grand Californian, that sort of thing. I mean, face it, this is a convention. You could, your room is basically where you go to haul your crud back to and fall asleep, shower in, head out the next morning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know a lot of people think that, I'm going to, to an event around Disneyland, I should stay on property, but, this is a horrible thing to say at Disney, but save your money, because you're going to spend it at the convention anyway.
That's right.
But yeah, just get yourself a hotel room there on the Strip, and you could walk to the hotel or to the convention center. And, but yeah, it's a very, I've been to a number of events there. I've done all three of the D23 expos there. It's a relatively easy to navigate, friendly convention center, which I know sounds strange. But
no, it actually sounds quite welcoming, because we were just at one last weekend, and it was very nice, but very confusing.
Well, that's. I think the thing that always worries me about convention centers is when you can hear the Minotaur behind you.
That's right.
Run, but which way?
That's the thing, and this isn't that space. It's that that this is a convention center that kind of learned the hard way, how to be a successful convention center, and did an amazing redo and expansion about 10 years ago, and in fact is part of the Disney Garden District that grew up with DCA. And you lucked out. It's at a great facility. So and enjoy the fact that Disneyland's right across the way.
Yeah, is it just a hop, skip, and a jump to walk to Disneyland from the convention center?
Is it 10-minute walk? If that, Len?
I mean, right at 10 minutes. It's not a bad walk at all, though. I don't know that I want to do it at 3:00 in the morning, but because of the traffic, it's kind of weird at that hour, but absolutely fine.
Sure.
Yeah, but again, again, part of this DCA thing, the entire neighborhood around Disneyland, which used to be pretty sketchy, is now this lovely, lush garden district that I mean, they share this sort of common language of pathways and walkways, and it's easy to navigate. And more to the point, just look at the place where the fireworks are going off and head in that direction. That'll be the theme park. So.
Very good. Well, guys, you can see your coffee's getting low, and we still need to ask you your 5 questions. So we want to give you an opportunity to sort of talk about projects and things that are going on in your worlds that our listeners can look forward to.
What are we doing, Len?
Well, we just came back from Disney World, and we're doing this series of live podcasts. So we recorded while we were in each of the parks, sort of walking around, talking about not only the history of the parks and how they were developed, but what's going on behind the scenes that you can expect to see in the next 2, 3, 5 years. So those are over on disneydish.bandcamp.com.
And we'll put a link to that in our show notes for sure.
I appreciate it. And you can get some of our older episodes there too. In fact, some of the older episodes on there are ones we did in 2011, 2012, where we started talking about this little film Disney was doing. What was the original title, Jim? The Ice Queen?
Oh, yeah. Something involving a Hans Christian Andersen story.
Oh, I've heard of this.
But Jim actually refers to it by its original, it's his working title at the time. And they're like, and Jim's like, it's going to be huge. I'm telling you, I've seen I've seen the script. It's going to be huge. And I'm like, whatever. And I kind of move on because I'm like, well, it's going to be like Chicken Little or something like that. But we've got that. And then, we're always working on stuff for the sites. So.
Well, yeah, and I can honestly say one of the things that drew me to you guys in the first place was those podcasts you're talking about, walking through when these two ladies and gentlemen are walking through the parks, talking about what's going on. I mean, you've heard it on Coffee with Kenobi here tonight. It's absolute podcasting gold. So we're so fortunate to have you on.
No, that's very sweet of you to say. But, again, Len does all of the hard work, which is cutting out those moments when Disney security comes running after us. So,
Well, it's all wonderful. So speaking of that, and I know, Len, you're particularly excited about this. This will be interesting. We have our 5 questions that we ask all of our guests, and let's just do this. Corey, what do you think? We'll ask one question, and they'll just take turns answering. Sound good?
Sure.
I'm so scared. Go ahead.
No, these are layups. These are softballs.
All right.
So we'll start with you, Len. What is your favorite Star Wars movie?
Episode 4. It's sort of the original. You get all the characters. It was just it was so groundbreaking. My parents actually took me to see it in a theater, which my family was not well off when we were growing up. So going to see something in a theater was a big deal. And I remember sitting there just being amazed by the special effects, but also, the imagination of all of it, that it was, you could tell it was a Western. Because it sort of followed a Western plot, and my dad liked Westerns, so we watched them all the time. But it was just thought out in this really novel way that, I was just fascinated by it. And I thought it was great. I still like it.
Jim, what about you?
I have to concur with Mr. Testa. I mean, the New Hope. I mean, you have to understand, I'm old. I'm 56. I remember I was at my high school graduation rehearsal, and my friend Jim Reiki had seen Star Wars the night before and couldn't speak English anymore. He was just blithering about this movie that he'd seen. Death Star, Millennium Falcon, you have to see this. And it was like, okay. And I remember, driving. And again, this was, wide release then. It was in 2 theaters. It was in Boston. It was in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I actually had to wait a week or 2 because you could never get tickets to Worcester until it finally opened in Framingham, Mass, and getting to see it. And for me, I think my favorite moment out of the films was that moment when the Millennium Falcon comes diving out of the sun. And it just, because the first time you saw that, you didn't know what was going to happen. And it was like, how the hell is he going to get out of this? And then, you said goodbye to him, and here he comes back to save the day. And it was I just remember the noise the audience made, and just the way they erupted. And in fact, I guess that's the thing. I kind of feel bad for this next generation of Star Wars fans, because so many of them now are watching it at home or seeing them for the first time on Blu-ray, on widescreens at home, or on phones, or that sort of thing. And when you saw these in theaters with an audience, when it was a communal experience, you can't ever take away that memory of that moment, or with that noise, that feeling, to see that moment happen.
That's why there'll always be movies. I mean,
that's
movie
right.
Theaters. That's it right there.
I mean, that's why the cinema experience is the way it is, because of something like Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I have the same feeling for I went and saw Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one, in theaters, and at the end of it, no one wanted to leave. Yeah, people just got up and started talking.
Mm-hmm. The other thing people don't do anymore is clap after movies either. I remember when I was a kid clapping after all movies. Yeah, it's kind of gone away. They get on their iPhones and they start tweeting about things.
Yeah, they're tweeting about it in the middle of the movie. Yeah.
Oh, I do have one other thing to add here. Is that I managed a theater, again, when I was in college. So this was, when did Empire come out? 83?
1980. Jedi was 83.
Okay, 80. Okay. All right. When you managed a theater, you got to see movies early because you had to bid on the film. I mean, we were a little independently owned house, and so the owner said, "Would you go into Boston and take a look at the second Star Wars movie and decide?"
Oh my!
This was like April or May I took my brother Peter, and it was one of these things. We actually had to sign something at the end that said that we would not reveal who Luke's father was.
Wow.
But it was one of these things to get to see the movie, and it was in this giant, like 1,500 seat house where it was maybe 30 people who owned, movie theaters and that sort of thing, who decided whether they wanted to bid on this thing. And to get to see it that early under those circumstances and then not be able to tell anybody, was like, but that was great fun.
Very good, very good. So the second question is your favorite Star Wars character. Jim, let's start with you.
Wow, that would be hard. I mean, I guess I love what Alec Guinness does with, Kenobi. I mean, it's such a fun performance to watch, and now the weird things to watch it in context, with the the prequels.
Yes.
And to understand the backstory, but he's so much fun to watch, and he brought so much gravity to the film. And I remember again how shocking it was in the middle of New Hope to lose him. Mm-hmm. This charming performance and this great actor, and he's gone, but he's not.
Isn't it kind of funny? The guy dies like 5/8 of the way through the first film, and yet he's in all of them.
Yeah. And you, Len, who's for you?
I was thinking Kenobi as well, but I was going to compare him to the sort of the Samuel L. Jackson. Mm-hmm. Samuel L. Jackson sort of has this sort of deep mentoring advisor role.
Yes.
In the films too, but it's not the same as like Alec Guinness. It's you can tell Alec Guinness has a different depth.
Right. He probably doesn't have the same saying on his wallet that Samuel Jackson does.
Which is,
I can't say it on the air.
Okay,
but
all right.
If you've seen Pulp Fiction,
I have seen.
Let's just say he's a bad, you know what?
Oh, is that it? That's what I was going to guess it was.
Yes.
I was going to get these snakes off my Millennium Falcon.
That's right.
So. Yeah, the funniest thing is you mentioned Pulp Fiction. So I've made my daughter watch 3 classic films from when I was growing up: Star Wars, Ghostbusters, and Pulp Fiction.
How old is she?
Wow,
she's 16. I know. It's terrible parenting.
Well, it's not like she's
eye-opening.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, well, that's when she was 5, but
she never looked at a needle the same way.
Yeah, I know, right?
So, what is your favorite line of dialogue or film moment? Well, let's go back to you.
Probably the first time I saw. They're all great films. The first time I saw the lightsaber, during the desert scene, right?
And A New Hope in Obi-Wan Kenobi's hut.
Yeah, and because that wasn't a kind of weapon that I was expecting in that scene, and just you remember hearing the sort of the vibrating noise it makes, the oscillation noise it makes, the
oh yes.
And in a theater, it's buzzing in your ear and everything. And I thought it was unexpected, but didn't it sort of like lend both Obi-Wan and that part of the film like a certain sort of dignity?
It adds a gravitas, and it becomes literally.
That's what I was going to use, actually.
Yeah, it's like the Merlin and Arthur relationship. I actually just wrote about this for Star Wars Insider. But
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if Obi-Wan would have pulled out a laser, a pistol, or something, it wouldn't have been the same, right? He'd be a different character,
right?
And I thought that was such a nice touch. And Lucas got that from you get it from the Seven Samurai? Was it the Kurosawa film?
Mm-hmm. That's one of the many. Yes.
And so years after that, I understood the reference. My dad actually, after I was old enough to see, after one of the Star Wars movies came out, we actually went back and watched Seven Samurai, and then also my dad's literally his favorite film of all time was The Searchers. So
that's cool.
Yeah, so I kind of knew. I mean, I'd probably actually seen The Searchers before I'd seen Star Wars, so I kind of knew the cut of Luke coming home and everything.
Well, you mentioned that how Star Wars is like a Western earlier, anyway.
And it kind of is, but I kind of knew that just from watching The Searchers too. But the way he blends the Kurosawa stuff, it was just you could tell that he's using the best from really 2 different genres, right? I mean,
mm-hmm.
Japanese, post-war Japanese films are one thing, and American Westerns are another. But
I highly recommend the book How Star Wars Conquered the Universe by Chris Taylor, where he kind of goes into the background, the influence of all those. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a wonderful book. You'd absolutely love it. Yeah,
absolutely terrific book.
Oh, good. I'll look it up. What's it called?
Okay.
How Star Wars Conquered the Universe. I can send you the link if you want.
Please, thanks.
So, Jim, what about you? Favorite line of dialogue or film moment?
I'm almost embarrassed to admit that I've got a bad feeling about this. The fact that it just keeps popping up over and over, and it became this touchstone for the series. But I got a bad feeling about it. It's this wonderful piece of connective cheesy tissue, for the films that but don't get me wrong, there's lots of great, legitimately great dialogue, but for some odd reason, that moment just felt, just connected with the pulp sources of the material, and at the same time was sort of a wink and a nod to the members of the audience. It's just, again, just sort of gave you a hint of what great fun this film was.
Absolutely, and I always forget how much comedic moments are in the films as well too. You have this kind of this surreal moment that you're in space, all of a sudden they throw a joke in there, something like that, or Han's usually shooting his mouth off or something like that. But definitely a good one. So for you guys, I don't know if you collect a whole bunch of Star Wars stuff, or maybe I would reference this to Disney stuff. I'd be interested to know as well. So if you collect, what's your favorite collectible that you own?
I have collected an odd memory that's I have to sort of set this up. I mean, you have to understand, I've been writing about the Disney company for 30 plus years, and I have this kind of interesting relationship with Walt Disney Imagineering, because they'll work very hard in secrecy, but I have a lot of friends who work for the company who hand me things. And,
there's the official channel, then there's the back channel.
That's right. Then there's the back door, which they occasionally hold open. So it's the opening, it's the press event for Star Tours The Adventure Continues. And just totally by coincidence, I end up in line behind all of the Imagineers who have developed this thing. I mean, there's Tom Fitzgerald and the whole crew, and they're ahead of me in line, and we're all moving up. And, and so initially they're all pointing to the things they worked on, and they're really excited. And somebody looks back and sees me, and they all start making shorter hand gestures because they don't want to give away, oh, Jesus, Jim Hill is here. But then it comes time for, we all ended up loaded into, the same Star Speeder. And it comes the moment when they, they scan the car and they find out who the rebel spy is. Oh, yeah. And my fat face comes up on screen. and this carload of Imagineers laughs for the next 2 minutes because, of course, Jim Hill is the rebel spy. Of course. And then what was really cool was that at the end of the ride, they're all coming up to me, and it's like, that was so cool. You were the rebel spy. And now they proceed to tell me all the stories that they weren't going to tell me before.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, that's good.
That's the first time someone's mentioned the Star Wars collectibles as their
as a memory,
as a memory, and that's fantastic.
I love that.
Yeah. All right, Len. Now you got to try to top it.
Yeah,
that's a tough one. I don't really have any Star Wars collectibles. I collect very few things.
All your Vinylmations, right?
Those are Laurel's Vinylmations. But you guys have seen my kitchen, right?
No. Well, I saw the picture you tweeted what you were partaking of during the show.
So my kitchen is designed as a full-scale replica of the Space Mountain post show.
Wow,
cool!
With the actual table, all of the centerpieces, and everything. We Laurel and I, when we have a mid-century modern house, so it was built in the 60s. It was the home of the future, and so we decided to replicate the dining room scene from the Walt Disney World Space Mountain post show queue. So we flew an architect down. Sam, you guys know Sam Genoway did the
yes,
yeah. Sam flew down to translate from Disney speak to architecture speak,
wow.
And did a full scale replica of the modern table, the semicircle banquette, the 4 plasma video screens in the back, everything full scale.
That is incredible.
You should, so if you go into Google and type in Len Testa Space Mountain Kitchen, you'll see the photos.
Oh, sweet.
If I could jump in here, Glenn,
please do.
And again, I don't know if you're going to be comfortable telling this story, but it does kind of speak volumes about you and your dad and the relationship you had. But do you remember talking to me about your dad in the hospital and the Star Wars thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. So my dad passed away in 2011, and he was not in good health for a long time. He had a heart problem, but we, like the kids and him, we always laughed. So he's actually in the emergency room, in the hospital bed, where eventually he would pass away. And this was like, a day or so before. And we know things are serious, but we're trying to make light of it. So he's got this oxygen mask on. He's breathing. And his breathing is very labored. And after you're there for 8 hours, you start to get a little punchy. And you guys, this may sound terrible to you, but trust me, everyone laughed, including my dad. But I said, Dad, can you do me a favor with the mask on? And he said, yeah. Can you say, Luke, I'm your father? And he did. It was the funniest damn thing. He was breathing like. It was kind of like Don Corleone doing it, but one of the best memories that I have of that's sort of like how I would remember him.
That's great. That's wow.
Great. Look, thank you, Jim, for remembering that.
Well, God bless your dad for having the levity.
I know, right?
Right to do that anyway.
That was funny. I remember that.
Well, it's almost like you've answered our next question before I've even asked it, because the last question we asked for this set is, what particular messages or themes about the Star Wars saga resonate or speak to you? They get a little more thinky as we move along.
Yeah, so I'm not saying I believe the entire mythology or anything, but do I think that maybe there might possibly actually be a thing called the Force, that exists somehow that maybe makes us do good? After a couple of drinks, I can kind of see my way to sort of acknowledging that. More
like the notion of, finding a rationale in the universe and trying to be the best version of you because of it.
Yeah, that's actually, well, you put a lot of thought into that, way more than I have. Yeah, that's actually a good way of putting it. I can kind of see my way to that.
I will say that again, when this film came out in the 70s, and you have to understand that this is post-Watergate, post-Vietnam, it was an incredibly cynical, demoralizing time. And to have, I think that's honestly one of the reasons why people latched on to Star Wars the way they did. Just that the notion of the Force, that there might be some element of good, out there in the universe. It just, in a distinctly bad time, that was something people really latched onto, and it's been interesting to watch that resonate for are we really coming up on 40 years?
Yeah, 1977.
Ouch. So old. So
crazy. Well, guys, so much incredible fun talking about this. I could sit here and listen to you both talk about this for hours, and the good news is that people have the option to do that by downloading all the great things that are going on from Jim Hill Media and, of course, Len, your work at WDW Today. How can listeners get in touch with either of you if they want to ask you a question or just say hello?
Jim. That's I think both of us are eminently reachable. You can throw a line to Jim at JimHillMedia.com, and Len, you're I think that's one of the things we try to do with the Disney Dish podcast is we're taking requests now that we're, how many shows now?
75. Plus the ones that I have in the can that I haven't, probably at 80 right now.
Yeah. But it just that we love having people ask us about history or stories that we haven't thought to do and go that way. So, we're very reachable. We're very open. just write anything in the back of a $20 bill, and we're there.
Cheap too. I got it.
I'm stealing from Click and Clack. I'm a bad person.
And one of them is dead, Jim. One of them is dead.
I'm really a bad person. So.
Well, it was a fantastic conversation. We thank you so much for being guests on Coffee with Kenobi, and we'd love to, of course, speak with you in the future, and we hope that we'll get to see you at Celebration.
Oh, well, absolutely would. I'd love to come back. I know Len would, and again, if somebody wants to hold open a door at Celebration, I'm there. Just back door at the convention center.
Well, maybe we'll cosplay, and I'll be Luke, and you can be Yoda, and just hop in the backpack, and we'll just
there you go.
Okay. Wow, you're going to be wearing a truss. You have seen the pictures, right? Maybe I'm just saying. Blanket his name, the fat one.
Jabba?
There we go. All right, just maybe just push me in as a slug. Okay, so.
I guess that means I'll be the monkey.
Ah, well,
I'm Princess Leia, so this is not going well right now.
Okay,
okay, and
wrap it up. Okay.
Chewie, get us out of here!
If you would like to respond to our question of the show, have a comment, or just want to say hello, send us an email or MP3 at feedback@coffeewithkenobi.com. Or if you have a specific question or comment for either of us individually, email us at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com or CoreyC@coffeewithkenobi.com, or visit us at coffeewithkenobi.com and click on the Contact Us section, or comment on one of the stories featured on the site. If you enjoy the show, please write a review in iTunes or Stitcher. You can also like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, as well as keep up to date at our Twitter feed @coffeewithkenobi. You can also find us on Tumblr at coffeewithkenobi.tumblr.com. If you enjoy the jazz music, the album is Eye to Eye by Steve Torok.
Give the evacuation code signal.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along. Move along.